Hey, it's Ben Cossy here to bring you another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series, the show where we take a look at Mocs from the community to inspire you to generate new and exciting ideas, as well as we like to encourage a little bit of positivity and self-belief in the community, because that's what we do. So it's time to chat about Matoran MOCs, and hopefully by taking a look at some of these, we can inspire you to make some Matoran MOCs of your own, because nothing cooler than making a cute little Matoran MOC. Matoran are awesome. And I definitely think something awesome about making a Matoran is the fact that the Mocs themselves are a lot smaller. They don't require too many pieces, but you can still jam-pack in a lot of fun little details there and make a really fun, awesome, dynamic-looking character. And, you know, maybe you're a little bit stretched for time, but you really want to build something. Well, why not make a little bit of a smaller Moc? And then that way you still get to have that nice little fix of building in for the week. But, you know, you don't have to spend hours and hours or heaps of money investing parts and time and everything. You just build something a little smaller, and you still get to build something. So there you go. Anyway, let's take a look at 4 Matoran MOCs for today's episode. So, the first MOC that we have today is by Muffin Toa and his 2 Matoran MOCs called Diffalac and Dekar. So you may remember these guys from the Toa Mari wave from 2008. Was it 2008? I feel like that might be... No, I think that's correct. 2008? I want to say it was. Anyway, besides the point, this is a revamp of a couple old Matoran sets. If you don't remember them, here is what they look like. Really interesting to note that some of them have some slight aesthetic changes. You know, we see that Dakar has a bit of a color update. Both of them were silver and then whatever color that their mask was. Whereas now Dakar is more primarily black and Keat orange, which, you know, just because you're revamping the set doesn't mean you have to stick to the color scheme. You can make some slight additions there. Like, I think this MOC is instantly recognizable as Dakar, and yet technically the color scheme is wrong. But that doesn't really matter at all. So yeah, have a little bit of a think about that if you're planning on revamping a MOC. You don't have to stick with the same color scheme. You can still achieve the look of the character with, you know, some slight changes or additions and things like that. So both of these guys share roughly the same frame, and it's a really superposable, awesome frame for such a small MOC. You can see various points of articulation throughout everything. You know, you can see basic articulation points on the torso, the arms. He's even got an elbow joint for both of them. He's even got waist articulation, 10 points on both of them. You know, articulation points on the legs. It looks like there's even articulation points on the knees there, simply done through axles rather than ball joints there. And then you got the feet articulation there too. So you've got pretty much all the basic points of articulation. Oh, and neck articulation. Forgot to mention that. Which is awesome to see. Really, really awesome to see just how posable you can get a Matoran to be. You know, just because a MOC is small doesn't mean you can't do some crazy awesome stuff with it. So that's really cool to see. I really, really like that. Definitely, I think one of the most important pieces to be using for a Matoran, if you want it to be superposable, is the piece that's used on the elbow here, this sort of elbow joint piece here, because it's got multiple connection points on it where you can attach heaps of things, and as a result it allows for it to be posable too, so you can kind of get that muscle flex there if you want your MOC to be posable. It doesn't have to be posable. You can make a statue or you can make a superposable MOC. It's whatever's up your alley. But I definitely think if you're planning on doing a Bricklink order or you're looking through your collection, have a look for some of those pieces, because if you're looking for some posability on your Matoran, that part is very, very useful, as we see here, and it allows you to use not too many pieces, but still achieve a very nice looking design there. Pretty cool, pretty awesome, important part. It's the part of the day, if you will. Also like the little subtle differences between this. Like I said before, it's basically the same frame, but there's little tiny additions to it that really separate the MOCs from each other and adds a little bit of fun flair. You know, you take a look at the torsos here, very, very different torso designs. One of them's kind of mainly using this Matoran-y sort of waist piece there, and then it's got some other connection points on there, and you know, you can add it into the waist articulation there. Whereas you take a look at Dakar's torso, and yeah, well, that bit's a lot more custom, and he's even got a little bit of a heart light there. Heart lights always look cool on Matoran or Toa or whatever you're building. And it's just, yeah, it just looks nice. I really like that. And then we take a look at the legs. Very, very different designs there. The arms are basically the same. But then, yeah, we take a look at the waist, and just simply using a different type of lift arm there actually does a lot for the MOC. And then, you know, one of them's got the shoulder cannon like the sets originally had, whereas Deflac there, he's just got the swords on his back, and he looks pretty cool with them there. So interesting to see the very little subtle differences that actually do a lot to differentiate the two of these guys. Pretty cool. Really like it. So, very awesome Matoran design. One of my favorite looking kind of posable Matoran designs there. Let's take a look at another Matoran MOC by Bob the Doctor 22, and this MOC is called Matoran Mira. So really like this a lot. Really cool bow design there, using some of these funky Spike Atlantis pieces there, whatever those are called. That's what I'm going to call them. Really like that. Makes a very effective looking bow, simply tying in some string there, whether that's official string or just some string you've bought from like a hobby shop or something. Really doesn't matter, but it looks good. And then you got really simple arrow designs here, simply using a bunch of sort of bar pieces, a little lightsaber connector piece there, a little lightsaber hilt, and then one of those sort of spike pieces there to make a nice custom arrow. But we take a look at the back. On the back of this Matoran, his little quiver there is simply just made using some of the minifigure spear pieces. I just think it's really interesting. There's not too many pieces involved in that bow, and those arrow designs are very simple. Some of them are literally just minifigure utensils, and you get a really effective, small-looking bow design that really is the focal point of this MOC. And I like that. You know, you don't have to overcomplicate it. You can literally just use a couple pieces and make a really effective bow. And I definitely think with this MOC, and actually with any MOC, you can make a bit more of a simplistic design, something that's, you know, not too out there or unique, but you add one little subtle thing like this bow design, which is really simple but really clever, and it really makes the MOC pop. It really turns it from it's pretty cool to a, whoa, that's really awesome. And I love that. I love how much one little subtle addition can do for a MOC. So maybe you're building something right now, or you've already built something, and you're looking at it and you're like, it's just missing something. Maybe it just really needs a really super cool looking weapon, and that's just enough to make it even cooler. Or maybe you just need to make, I don't know, like a custom head or a really cool arm design or something like that. Just one little subtle addition, whether it's, it takes heaps of pieces to make, or it's just a little something extra. That can really make a MOC turn from pretty cool to pretty awesome. So it's something to consider when you're building stuff. And like we see on this MOC here, it's a relatively simple but really effective design. Taking a look at the Matoran design itself, uses a bunch of those Borok sort of arm and feet, well not feet, arm and leg pieces there, whatever those are called, I'm not too sure what they are. They're a bit of a smaller piece there, so it lends itself naturally to working for a Matoran design here. Very nice to see. Got a very custom torso there too, works nicely. And then the Surge mask there is a little bit of a smaller mask. You know, you take a look at some masks, and they're pretty large and wouldn't quite work for a Matoran possibly. Although I challenge you, maybe they can work for a Matoran. Prove me wrong, use some bigger masks on Matoran. But take a look at some of those smaller masks. You know, a lot of the Bionicle G2 masks were pretty small and would work better for a Matoran. So maybe it's better to look into some of those smaller masks and see what you can achieve through using those. But awesome design, looks really cool. Let me actually take a look at these feet here. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm 90% sure that part does not exist in that color. So most likely that's a bootleg part. Definitely take a look at some of those bootleg sets. If you want to go down that avenue, you of course don't have to. Always nice to just purely support Lego, but if you want to get a part that exists in a color that, you know, it just simply didn't turn out to appear in any Lego set, then take a look at some of those bootleg sets, because they often include pieces in unique colors that they didn't exist in official Lego sets. And on this MOC here, it looks pretty nice. So that's a Matoran by Bob the Doctor 27. Let's take a look at the next MOC by Diego Corridera, and this is Toa / Matoran Dima. So I love this. The last Matoran episode, I had a MOC or two that sort of had that progression from Matoran to Toa, and I love that. I always think that's so cool. It's always so cool to see guys who make a character and have them in all three forms, whether it's Toa, Matoran, or Turaga. Always like that. And I think this is a really fun MOC to take a look at and sort of see the progression between the Toa and between the Matoran. It's just cool. It's nice to notice the little fun details and everything there. So for example, I really like the changes in the staff here, simply using this Aqua Raiders trident piece that came in black there. Also came on Toa of Turaga no Kama, but that specific part in that specific color came in an Aqua Raiders set, if I'm correct. Just nice to see a very simplistic design there, but then we take a look at the staff on the Toa version, and it's got a lot more detail into it. And we definitely take a look at the top bit of that trident, playing around with a whole bunch of different claw pieces and different sort of connector parts and stuff like that. You get this crazy cool looking trident. Looks awesome. Really like that design. And it's nice to see the sort of subtle nods between a sort of more simplistic version and a little bit more of a more complex version. It's just interesting, you know, the Turaga sort of has a little bit more kind of dumbed down stuff, whereas the Toa has more detail poured into it. And I think that's cool. Just kind of like the look of that. So we see some similarities, we see some differences, we see some upgrades. So some of the similarities would be the fact that they both share that same torso. Basically, both of their heads are pretty much exactly the same, except the hair seems to be sort of placed in a slightly different manner. It kind of looks like the hair is more sort of further back on the Toa, whereas it's a bit more further forward on the Turaga. I think that's probably placed in the exact same way, but just simply the way that it's been placed for that picture, I actually think does a lot for the two characters. It kind of looks like the Toa version, it's almost sort of getting ready to be tied up in a ponytail, like she's ready for battle, whereas this Turaga is just kind of letting the hair roam around, because, oh, my battling days are over, there's no more time for any battling, I'm just going to let my hair flow around and blah-blah-blah. I like that. It says a lot about the character. I think that's cool. Little rubber band there as a little belt. It's just a fun little addition there. Whether it's meant to be a belt or whether that's actually holding stuff together there. Either way, it works. I like that a lot. And something that I think is interesting about this MOC, we take a look at this compared to some of the other ones. This is a much larger Matoran design. But I actually highly recommend you do that, because that to me is always the sign of a really talented builder is, you can take a look at some of the LEGO certified professionals, and man, they build some incredible stuff. They build huge monuments of LEGO, which is just, like a life-size car and things like that, and that's incredible. But I sometimes see those guys struggle at building smaller stuff. And that doesn't mean they're any less of a builder or anything, but building small, in my opinion, can be a lot more difficult because you have to jam-pack details into a smaller space, whereas if you have a huge amount of space, it's really easy to shove in details. So I recommend if you really want to pack in your details into a Matoran, build them a little bit bigger than you might traditionally see, because that way you have a lot more room to play with and a lot more room to add detail and add little things and stuff like that. So I recommend you do that. Also, taking a look at this MOC, I noticed that the arm design there is almost exclusively just CCBS bones, but it works kind of nicely. I like the fact that the top bit there isn't armored, kind of adds a little bit of age to the MOC, and it also makes it look a little bit more feminine, as well as a little bit more reminiscent of the Toa version, which is very nice, very nice. There's a lot to love about these two guys. Well, technically girls. Pretty cool. I like them both. Really cool to see the progression between the two. So I definitely recommend you do that. Take a look at some of your pre-existing MOCs or future MOCs and go, you know what, I'm going to build them as a Toa. Or you know what, I'm going to build them as a Matoran. Or you know what, I'm going to build them as a Turaga. Because it's always fun little challenge or little idea there. I like it. So let's quickly take a look at the bonus MOC, which is by Charles Abel and is a Matoran named Kopawi. Probably pronouncing that wrong, but Kopawi is what I'm going to call him. So this was a submitted MOC and a pretty awesome MOC. Really like this color scheme, that tan and dark green, a little bits of silver there. Actually a nice little dynamic color scheme. I quite like that. I really like the addition of the weapons here. We saw some cool weapons on some of the other ones, but I really like the kind of classic callback that these have here. That Turaga sort of hammer there, and then adding that kind of cool looking shield there. I don't know, it just has a really nice kind of classic, really early G1 look to it, and it says a lot about this character. I think it's kind of cute. I think it's kind of cool. I really like this design here. You can see a few little nods to some of the things we saw before, like those Borok feet being used there in tan on the legs, and just some other nice additions. Ball joints definitely play a big role in making any kind of Matoran here, just because it's a lot easier to make things in sort of smaller spaces if you've got a bunch of ball joints. So if you're planning on doing an order, it's always nice to throw in a few ball joints there if the Bricklink store has them. So pretty cool. Really like this little Matoran by Mr. Charles Abel. Thank you for submitting. And if you want to submit some of your own MOCs to the show, you of course can. The only way to do so is through the email that you're currently seeing on your screen. If you send me some pictures and ideally you send me a link, if you don't have a link, you can send me pictures, but I prefer a link, that MOC will be added to the list and one day it'll appear on the show. So that's it for 4 Matoran MOCs from this episode on Matoran. Let me know if this episode inspired you. Happily would love to see some of the things you made as a result. And that's all the time we got for today. Happy building, guys. I'll see you in the next episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series. Happy building. Bye for now.